I just like to start by introducing myself. I'm called Sarah Prosser, and I've just started at GIY as a weaver, which was always my dream to be have a title that was actually called, I once saw something at a conference called Chief Social Weaver, and I thought, oh, what a job. And then this one came up and I thought, oh, that's what I'd love to be able to do. And I'm so happy to be able to join GIY and the fabulous team there. The job is around what's called the Bioregional Weaving Lab, and we're here today because it's Earth Day, but also because they've just launched 172 pages of insights report on the European regional level, about all the insights that they've managed to that our partners have managed to put together over the last few years. And come up with the concept around a bioregional weaving lab as a way of making real impact from the ground up. But the report that's just been launched is quite a lot from the top down, and we see it as our role really making it happen, and what's the way that we can actually go out into the communities and include people. But one of the insights that they came up with various insights, and I think maybe the main one was to stop working so fragmentedly. Everybody is really passionate about this, but there's very little connection between people on a personal basis, but also on a sort of project basis or in a place sense. Another insight was that we really need a common language, and we shouldn't blast people with new words that don't mean anything. And here is us saying that we want to start talking about a bioregional weaving lab. So the thing about language, whether it includes or separates, is an interesting one. But at the moment, we're going with it. And so we thought we'd start just by looking at these three concepts. Bioregion, it's actually a very official thing, and that some people will not recognize that this is exactly a bioregion, but it's something that will evolve as we go. But basically, it's an area defined by ecological features and the communities within it that's large enough to support potential collaboration for sustainable and regenerative futures. So we're talking about the Waterford County as a sort of bioregion, but even though we're talking about different river basins, and we're talking about rivers that go much further north than just Waterford, but we're starting down in the county of Waterford as our focus, and we'll see where it goes from there. When we talk about weaving, we're talking about the process by which different stakeholders, so everyone from farmers or policymakers, innovators, NGOs, citizens, and corporations, can all learn together how to interconnect people and projects and places around a shared purpose. And that is really sort of one of the definitions of this sort of new trend of collaborative innovation. And this collaboration for innovation is what a weaver comes in and tries to do in teams. And the final thing is this lab concept, which we define as a convening concept and place for supporting the testing and implementing of nature-based solutions, social innovations, and new ways of collaborating for collective impact. So this is looking both locally, what's available in the region, but also looking about how maybe we can get inspiration or ideas of what works on a European scale, and how can we connect things together and test them out so that together we're mixing both the nature-based and the social innovations together. So that's really the introduction. We've only got like 20 minutes, and so what we thought we'd do is Mick's going to talk a little bit about the wider concept of the bioregional lab, and then I'm going to come back a little bit and talk about what we've done so far in Waterford and what's coming next, and then we might have a little bit of discussion between the people that are here if we have time. So Mick, do you want to take it away?
Yes, please. Thank you, Sarah, and thanks a million to those of you that have come along today. Really appropriate. I think that it's Earth Day, and we're having the first of a couple of different kind of events and presentations that we're doing today. And you know, this feels like we've been working towards kind of announcing the Waterford bioregion for a long time. So it's really exciting for us to be sort of starting that process today of reaching out to different stakeholders in the community here in Waterford. I suppose just by way of a little bit of context, first of all, I mean, appropriately enough for Earth Day, I suppose to talk about, you know, some of the problems that you know, we're trying to address, I think, with this lab, as Sarah was saying. So I mean, the IPCC report that came out last week, I think, has kind of framed this as our last chance, really, as a species to try and address the enormous problems around climate change and biodiversity loss and so on. And I suppose in GIY, our concern, I suppose, typically is with the food side of that and the impact that the food system has on climate change. It's responsible for nearly 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions, around 70% of biodiversity loss. And the food system in total takes about 70% of our land use as well around the world. So it's got this massive outsized impact on climate change. And I think the kind of wholesale change that needs to come about to try and change that food system is kind of highlighted by the Eat Lancet report, and indeed the IPCC report have both said that the Sustainable Development Goals cannot be achieved without a kind of a wholesale change in how we produce food. And I think that's a sort of a key interest area for us in GIY, certainly. How this project came about for us was that probably about well over a year ago at this stage, I'm involved with an organization called Ashoka around the world, which supports social innovations like GIY. And we got approached about a really exciting European project, originally called Weaving for a Thriving Planet, but has now become known as the Bioregional Weaving Lab. And the idea was to take some of the best nature-based solutions, so social innovations in the kind of environmental area, and really weave them together to try and create real system change around biodiversity loss in particular. And so collectively, we've come together, those organizations, with a number of sort of what I would view as sort of ecosystem supporters. So Ashoka being one, also Common Land, and Peter is on the call at the moment, and the Presencing Institute and Project Drawdown Europe as the kind of convening organizations to bring these social innovations from around Europe together. And then the really sort of exciting, I think, innovation is the concept of these bioregional weaving labs. So picking, the ambition is for 10 of these regions around Europe, where we will try and sort of, weave together stakeholders to come together and look at solutions, nature-based solutions that can be applied in those bioregions, and then ultimately potentially bringing in innovations from around Europe to also come into those different bioregions. And collectively, we've set the vision for a biodiverse and climate positive future with healthy ecosystems, regenerative economies, and thriving communities. And the mission that the collective, the group of organizations have set ourselves is to mobilize 1 million change makers by 2025 to restore and regenerate 1 million hectares of European land and sea. And we talk about the 4 returns, which Common Land have developed as a framework to talk about the kind of returns that we need and the change we need to see. So they are social capital. The 4 returns are social capital. So obviously, points to the importance of social connectivity and jobs and so on that are so important as well. Obviously, the natural capital, so improving biodiversity and restoring ecosystems. The financial capital, which I think is equally important to have solutions that are have a sustainable financial return in them. And then finally, and I think very importantly, the inspiration. So being able to inspire change makers around Europe to get involved in this project. So that's our mission, and we're really excited to have, I suppose, early days been speaking to Common Land and Ashoka about Waterford being one of the bioregions, and we're delighted to be one of the first 4 bioregions that have started, and you can see the others on that screen. So basically, each of the different bioregions we think acts as a kind of almost like an exemplar for a particular issue of concern when it comes to kind of comes to the particular bioregion. So, for example, Arwa in Sweden is the theme of that bioregion is focused very much around the mountains and forestry. In Romania, it's about forestry and farming. In Spain, it's about desertification and dryland restoration. And in the Netherlands, it's all about the sort of intensive urban agriculture. Waterford, we felt when we started to talk about this, originally we felt there was a really strong theme that I think really suggested itself as a theme for the bioregion, which is that there's a tension in Waterford, I think, between the sort of the need for intensive agriculture growth, number of very, very large agri-food businesses based here in the bioregion, and obviously agriculture in particular, dairy agriculture and aquaculture are very much present here. So the tension between the need for that, continued growth in agri and aquafood sector, but also very significant population growth planned and economic growth across the region. And then the reality of the impact of that intensive agriculture on the landscape here, and the pollution in our rivers, and the vast waves of grassland around, which are needed for intensive agriculture. So we felt that we wanted the bioregion to explore the tension between those two things. How do we continue to grow, the agri-food sector and continue to create jobs and economic opportunities and so on, while also protecting the landscape here, and that's what we want to explore. And Sarah will explain in a little bit more detail how we're going about that. I should say also that we're delighted to have Sarah involved in this project. She comes from, she's worked previously as director of Ashoka in Norway, and has taken a leap of faith to join us and move over to Waterford from Oslo. We're delighted to have her involved and excited for the project to ahead. So Sarah, over to you to explain a little bit more about our next step.
Thank you very much, kind words. What I thought I'd do now is just do a little bit about what we're doing right now. All the different 5 bioregions that are working, we're all in this phase that we call the co-sensing phase, and it basically means you go out into your region and find out what's going on. So a sort of exploratory phase. So one part of it is just like finding out who would be the stakeholders. So we're setting up a database that sits there and gets bigger and bigger as people start saying, oh, have you heard about this person or that person? And it's very much a sort of snowballing effect that, you start speaking to someone and they speak to someone else and they say, have you heard about this? So one part of it is in a Excel database. Something else we've done is we put up a big map in the meeting room, and we started putting people on the map. Where are the different initiatives that might contribute towards this vision that we have of a resilient food system and thriving communities? And you see how far apart they are, and even the visual gaps between these tiny little initiatives that need to be supported if we're going to be able to weave together and really make a difference. But the most important thing we do maybe is the next slide, is actually go out and really meet people and talk to people. So at the beginning of March, we had a really fantastic week going out and talking to people. Like on the left there, we were at Kilbryan Parish Hall, and we were meeting the farmers from the Comera Hill Sheep Farmers Project, the European Innovation Project that's been going there for a while. And we met Owen Carton and Liam Beresford and Willie Dron from the Comera Mountain Sheep and Lamb initiatives. And they are so knowledgeable, and they've really been working in such a good way trying to link farms together and have these, they're doing some weaving as themselves. We also went to see James and Clodagh Foley on their farm, and there's a cow from their farm, and we really heard about the whole sort of challenges of multi-species swards and things that they're trying to experiment with there. And then we came back to the office at GIY and sat down and thought, well, what is the common vision? That's the yellow post-it in the middle. And what stakeholders would we really need to have in the room to make that change? So that's sort of where we are at the moment, trying to meet more and more people. And it's going to be about building trust and relationships, but also trying to think, well, how can we start weaving them together to really make the change? The next slide, I think, is like what we concluded. Having done that, we sort of thought, well, how do we actually put it into one sentence that might give us a real sort of intention where we want to go? So this one sentence is where we're playing with at the moment, that a resilient, we see that we need to weave people together to together build a resilient food system that supports thriving landscapes, seascapes, and communities in Waterford. Now that will probably change, but as soon as you have an intention, and that's where we want to go, and you build it up to be an ambitious place we want to go, people will hopefully see themselves in there and can come together and be slightly strategic about how we can weave together a collective innovation kind of project that can deliver on that. But it's really emergent. So everything's about finding where the energy suddenly shows itself to be. So nothing's decided. It's very much about this sensing and feeling and where things going to go. That why people might be interested. I mean, I think this thing on the top left there about collaborative innovation for a purpose you're passionate about. People do work far more fragmented than I think we ever realize. And suddenly being part of a team and part of a gang that really wants to do this together can unleash all sorts of things. The second one on the bottom left there is that we really want to find the other individuals maybe who would like to join a core team and really get together and say, how can we learn from each other to drive that change? But linking that to the top right, where we're working really with some of the best thinkers based on empirical evidence across Europe about how to make change and how we can do that both on a personal, professional and ecosystem level. So it's really linking people and organizations into some of the top people around when it comes to this way of working. And then finally, but not least, is that it's big and it's urgent and it's important. So that's a very good reason why it might be interesting for everybody. What's going to be done next, hopefully, is that we're going to have a phase in May and June of having more conversations around the bioregion to discover that common intent and the emerging projects. So I think another way of talking about that is just to say it's talk, 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 and meet and relationship building across Waterford. At the same time, doing much more in this mapping the bioregion. Where are the nature-based solutions? Where are the social innovations? Where are the new ways of working, and how can we weave them together? Thinking about the 4 returns that Mick mentioned earlier: inspiration, natural, social, and financial, and also about how can we begin to communicate and learn from each other. What kind of network does that look like, and how can we deliver on that? The next concrete meeting will be in around the sort of first, second week of June, which will be for all the people that we meet in Waterford, and hopefully come together and be able to start making a sort of more strategic plan around that, around the threads in the tapestry. And then on the 5th of July, we're going to welcome our international partners back to Ireland and have a really deep dive and look at the personal, professional and ecosystem levels, and what can we do to really set that up and take it further after the summer. So that's sort of like what next. It's 25 past already, I see. So maybe we were at one point, we thought we'd have breakout rooms, but we haven't got enough people to make that worth it. But I just think maybe it's still worth just writing, either taking the word, you can use the microphone, or write in the chat. We were going to ask 2 questions. We were going to ask, one, what is it, do you think, how would you describe your thread? You know, what is it that you bring to the tapestry? And that would be a way of introducing people. But the other question we were going to ask was, what one idea would you introduce into the region if you had all the power in the world today? What would you do? Would it be more farmers markets? Would it be a campaign for wool and dual purpose sheep, or what would it be? And we've got about 2 minutes. If anybody would like to take the microphone, it would be lovely to hear from you, and not just me and Mick, actually. So either in the chat if you don't want to speak, but it would be lovely to hear from you. Has anyone got either what they would like to bring in or what they would like to positively change?
Hi, Sarah. I'll kick the ball off. Apologies, I missed the first 20 minutes. I changed my laptop this week, and obviously all my settings need to be reset. But anyway, yeah, I suppose from my end, I work as Heritage Officer in Waterford City and County Council. So I suppose key areas of my work programme would be the whole area of biodiversity, and the council about to set up we have set up a climate action team, and we'll be embarking on a new climate action plan this year as well. But from my own end, I have a background in ecology. So I suppose we've been working steadily for the past 10 years on mapping the habitats across County Waterford, and a particular focus on wetlands the past couple of years. So one of the projects we have this year is a wetland action plan. And again, I suppose tying into, the whole area of climate and agri-environmental schemes, I would love if we could have a re-wetting of, agricultural lands that have been drained over the years. The OPW have a data set called benefiting lands, so lands that would benefit from drainage. Some of them have been drained, some of them have not. But I suppose to have sacrificial wetlands that can contribute to the control, slowing down the water, contributing to flood management, but also then providing habitats with biodiversity benefits as a result.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you. Perfect. We went and met Rory
Harrington, yes.
Harrington, yeah.
Yeah, and Rory's phenomenal, obviously, great wetland scientist, and has done fantastic work, particularly in Waterford, on integrated constructed wetlands, and even in the redevelopment of Mount Congreve at the moment, there's a wetland going in there, and yeah, so that's one of this. I suppose, like, Waterford would be the wetland capital county, definitely. I think we've bitten the bullet, and we've shown like what can be done. Other local authorities are a bit more cautious about the whole scheme,
That's great. I mean, I love the way that Waterford can be really right up the top, not only in Ireland but also with these other bioregional areas, and showing that these nature-based solutions really can make a difference and can be done. And then how can we link it into the really bigger questions about sort of risks and finance and how we support it all. But thank you, Bernadette. Would it be all right to come and meet and have a longer conversation than 1 minute?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, you did say that in your email. I didn't come back because I was kind of waiting to see how my dates figured out. But yeah, in the next couple of weeks, definitely we'll arrange that. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Is there anybody else burning to say something out there?
Sarah, I'd just love to say you touched on it briefly about the wool. When we met with the guys up in the Comoras, the one of the things that really just stuck in my mind was that they used to sort of have their household budget would be covered by selling the fleeces from the sheep every year. Like, it would keep their household in kind of household money. And now I think last year he was saying, Willie Drohan was saying, it cost him €800 to get the sheep sheared, and he got €80 for the fleeces. And at a time when we're talking rightly about fast fashion and the amount of plastics in our clothing and so on, wool is like such an incredible sustainable material, and yet there's absolutely no market for that wool. So I'd love to see a market being created for that wool somehow, and that amazing sustainable product maybe making a return in Waterford, I think would be great to see as well.
That's a nice vision. I had a very inspirational talk with Trevor at Cushendale Mills last week, the week before. They're bringing that in. Oh, Karen, your donut economic. I would love to see it. I agree totally. I would love to see it as a donut economic baby, poster child. Yes, because I think lots of the donut economic experiments I've seen now recently have been in cities, and it would be lovely to see it on a more of a sort of rural setting, and see how we could do it both with the city but also relating it to the whole region. So, okay, we have market for wool and a donut economic and a wetting of the wetlands. It's a good start, isn't it? I think we're going to have to. But thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to having more in-depth conversations with you all. Mick, do you want to just finish off? But
yeah, just to say thanks to everybody for coming along, and we just look forward to continuing the conversation. I think it's a really open, inclusive space that we're trying to create with all of the stakeholders in the food system, and across Waterford. So please let people know in your own networks who you think might be interested, and myself and Sarah's email addresses are there. So please do reach out and get in touch. And we will be in touch with you in due course about the upcoming events and so on. So thanks a million